I want to thank all the activists who've been out today campaigning. It's a great start to the Assembly elections campaign. Just no comparison with what we had the last time around. This really is the business, and I've spoken to people who are on the various stalls in the various towns, and I know you all know the great response. It wasn't just in one place for a few people, it's right the way across the board. The time for our message is absolutely right, which is why, as I'll talk in a little while, the other parties are so busy trying to steal it. We've made this happen. We really have. And you can feel it out there on the streets. Really can. And it's winnable, as Brian said. This really is winnable. We really can do it. And to win seats for the British National Party, in South Wales especially, one of the heartlands of the old Labour Party, which in the old days did good things, and has now betrayed all those things, it would send an enormous shockwave through the British political establishment. It really will make them sit up and take notice, not just of us and our message, but also the people of Wales, especially the people of South Wales, the most neglected parts, the places which have had their hearts ripped out of their communities, not by accident, not by a force of nature, but by government dogma. Tory government, Labour government, they're all the damn same. They've let the people down. People So we can win. We really can. But don't get carried away. What I want to talk about tonight is really about how this is a long, hard road that we're on. There's no easy, quick fix. We're not suddenly going to win and be swept to power. We're getting our toes on the lower rungs of the ladder towards power. That's all that we can achieve at the present. Don't get carried away and don't get disappointed if, with everything they throw against us, they manage to stop us. Because it's a long, long, hard road. Now, I know that what we've got here tonight overwhelmingly is activists, but you've virtually all heard me speak time and time again. You've heard other British National Party speakers speak as well about our core issues, our best known issues, and I'm not going to do the same again. I want to talk about something very, very different, and I'm absolutely sure that anyone else in British politics would say you can't make a speech like this to an audience of ordinary people. You know, this is a speech for the highfalutin, for the academics and so on. Is it health? Serious political issues affect people like us, ordinary people, more than they do the professors in their ivory towers and the people at the top of the BBC and so on. So therefore I don't believe that it's necessary to talk with the British National Party audience or any audience of British people in terms of sound bites and juvenile politics in the hope that they'll understand that, because they're too dumb to understand anything else. Nonsense. People can understand serious, complex issues. I believe that, I know it, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, if you come here to hear about our position on immigration, sorry, you're not going to hear it, other than to say the country is full. We're the third most overcrowded country in the world, the most overcrowded country in Europe, other than Malta, which isn't really a country, it's a postage stamp. Mass immigration is grotesquely unfair on the working people of this country, or the people who should have jobs. It's also grotesquely unfair on the tax-paying people of this country, especially the elderly, who paid in all their lives to get a decent system to look after them in their old age, and now they get thrown away and left to die. So we would shut the door, we will shut the door, and even before we come to power, we can make the other parties at least go some way towards shutting the door, at least slowing it down. So we're winning. It needs to be done because mass immigration is destroying this country and is so brutally unfair on the poorest and the most vulnerable sections of our society. It's not even fair on the third world, on the immigrants themselves, who come over here expecting to find streets paved with gold and find themselves in cheap labour jobs, rotten jobs, the kind of jobs that, well, employers will pay them the wages which we couldn't even work for, our people as a matter of fact, so they're exploited, and their own countries suffer the loss of the best of their people. Literally, they're the highest level of their society coming over here to empty our bins and wash our dishes, which means as a result that kids in their societies starve to death. Because there's not the people with brain drain stops their countries being run properly. So it's no kindness to them to cherry pick the best out of the third world and bring them here to empty our bins. They need to get back in their own countries, sorting out their own countries, looking after their own people like we want to look after our people. So, that's all I want to say about immigration. I want to talk about a bigger issue, a deeper issue, really, tonight, because immigration is only part of a massive, huge problem that our country has, and that's what I'm going to discuss. First of all, I want to address a little bit more the question of the hard road. And you know out there today that really everybody's on our side. We won the argument on issue after issue after issue. And if you were taking part, say, in the Bring Our Boys Home stalls a few months ago, you'll know there as well that we won the argument, that no one out there, no ordinary people, believe that our boys and girls should be sent to fight and die improperly equipped in a foreign war that has got nothing to do with Britain. We won all these arguments. We won them all. You can see most of all that we won them, but the fact that the other parties are taking them left, right and centre. When, first of all, Gordon Brown and now the Conservative Employment Minister both talk about British jobs for British workers, it's not an accident. They don't want to talk about British jobs for British workers because they're all of them committed to an international system where British workers are no different to workers in Shanghai or Bangladesh. And if a company can make more money by shipping their factory out there, then it's good luck to the factory and it's tough luck on the British worker. We don't believe that. We believe that the industry of this country, the natural wealth and the brilliance of the people of this country should be used to benefit the people of this country. And after that, the rest of the world as a trickle-down effect. The job of a government is to ensure that the economy is run for its own people. It's simple. It really is. And the Tories won't deliver on this new little promise of British jobs for British workers, but the fact they're having to make it is a tribute to your work as activists. And it means that when they fail to deliver, they've legitimised that message. It's no longer racist. It's no longer some piece of crazed protectionism that would damage the economy. No, they've said it's a good thing, because we said it was a good thing. And now if they don't deliver, people at some stage will want to turn to the people who said it's a good thing all along and who will deliver. So it's a step on the long road. It'd be easier if they just left us to it. So in the end, straight away people think the only people saying it is the British National Party, but they won't. They co-opted the idea, they co-opted the slogan. They won't deliver, but they've legitimised it. The same is true on Cameron's latest attack, which only mirrors what Brown and Blunkett said in the dying days of the Labour regime last, which is that multiculturalism has been a failure. Well, yes, we've known that for years, and they've accused us of racism, and they've beaten us, literally beaten us, and attacked us, and abused us, and tried to jail us, and constantly on every single TV news where the issue's been raised up, condemned us as bigots and all the rest of it, for saying that multiculturalism was failing, had failed and is dead, but now they say the same thing. So Mr Cameron says it's failed, so we're going to have to make sure that they learn English. While still holding the doors open to thousands upon thousands who don't speak English. But of course there's much more to it. Speaking English is a part of it, that'd be a good start. There's no point saying they should say they must learn English. The only way to make that happen is to say, unless you speak English or Welsh, you do not get benefits in this country. Unless you or your community teach your children English or Welsh, or both, they don't go to school at our expense in our society until they do. Because it's unfair and unfair. And it's also unfair on the children of immigrants who come to this country and have made the effort to integrate, have got on, who haven't held their hands out. It's unfair in all. It's even unfair on the kids who aren't learning English or Welsh, because in the politically correct system that we've got, the multicultural system, they don't have to. So, that kind of thing would be effective. But Cameron won't deliver on that. If Cameron wanted to deliver on doing away with multiculturalism and its evils, he wouldn't just say it's breeding Islamic extremism. He would say no more mosques are going to be built in this country because Islamic extremism isn't a byproduct, it's the direct result of the Quran, because the Quran is fundamentally an extremist book about conquering other people's issue by issue they try and co-opt it, but as he's done so, what's he done there? He's simply legitimised our message. He's told everyone, yes, multiculturalism is dead, and yes, you can talk about it, and therefore something must be done about it. And when they don't do something, those raised expectations are going to make people very angry. Yeah. Revolutions don't happen when people actually are particularly downtrodden. They happen when people have got raised expectations, think that something is within their grasp, think the regime has offered them something, and then find it's taken away from them again. That's when you get revolutions, which is what is at the end of our long road. So, they try to stop us through co-option, issue after issue after issue. Just one more. Was it 6-7 years ago, they twice tried to put me in prison for up to 7 years for talking about the problem, the appalling problem, of the sexual grooming of young, mainly girls, but also boys, in various towns and cities, including parts of South Wales, by gangs of Muslim pervert paedophiles. They tried to jail me for that. Then the police actually admit it's happening, and they arrest 2 ringleaders in Derby. Well, that's good, isn't it? 2 ringleaders. By their own acknowledgement, there was at least 50 men involved in that particular ring, and they think it's enough to jail 2 of them. I don't think so. Every single one of them should have been arrested. Every single one of them should have been tried. Every single one of them, if found guilty, should have been jailed to make sure they're punished. And at the end of their prison sentence, every single one of them should have been deported. The government won't do that, the system won't do that, and there we had the BBC. Who did they invite to talk about this issue? Not me, which would be illogical, considering the BBC was part of the conspiracy to jail me for talking about it. They had Jack Straw on, a man who has presided, has been in charge of politics in Blackburn, where it's been going on, but the police's own admission, for 15 years, and he's never said anything about the issue before, other than to condemn the local British National Party for daring to talk about the issue in the first place. So again, they try and co-opt, but nothing will actually get done. And then there's another tactic they're using now, and we see it well virtually every time you turn on Question Time. Who's there but Nigel Farage? With precisely the same status as us in terms of the criteria whereby the BBC decide whether you go on Question Time. The criteria was, well, it used to be you had to have elected councillors if you're a political party, so they wouldn't let us on, we didn't have. So we haven't got elected councillors. Yeah. Then they said, oh no, that's not enough, you've got to have them elected to a higher level. So we haven't got county councillors and a London Assembly member. Then they said, no, it's got to be MP or MEP, so we go and get 2 MEPs elected. And then we get one thing which wasn't Question Time at all. It was a public lynching, where for the first time in 35 years, unlike when they had Jerry Adams on, and they asked him to start with, Mr Adams, have you actually stopped ordering people to be killed? And then after that they went on to discuss housing and the NHS and transport and the things that are normally done on Question Time. But not in my case, no. So we get one public lynching, and UKIP with MEPs just the same as us. Nigel Farage is almost never off either Question Time or any answers or any questions or whatever. And this is most peculiar. What's going on here? This is the BBC, the Brussels Broadcasting Corporation, the most biased and anti-British semi-government organisation that there is in this entire country, fanatically pro-EU and everything that goes with it, promoting a supposedly anti-EU party. What is going on there? It's a safety valve. And it's quite remarkable, and again, it's a tribute to what we together have achieved. That the BBC feels so desperate to let this head of steam out, to let the British public think that something is being said, something is being done, to stop them turning to us, that they're actually prepared to boost a party, which does in fact, let's not be unfair about it, it contains many good people. Some of its MEPs do quite good stuff. They do raise the same issues that we raise, usually after we do, but nevertheless, they still raise them. None of the others do. At least they do something. So it must hurt the BBC and the British political elite and the people who control the mass media and so on, the likes of Rupert Murdoch, a fanatical internationalist. It must hurt them intensely to have to boost people who aren't really nationalist at all, but the public think they are. So it's creating this further groundswell that yes, we can talk about these things, and something should be done about these things. So they're playing a very dangerous game. It's what they always do. It's what regimes always do when their opponent's ideas become too strong, simply to ignore, simply to ridicule away, simply to crush by threatening to put people in prison. At that stage, they start taking some of them on and say, well, this bit's right, but that bit's unacceptable. And that's the way it goes. And the stronger the ideas become, and the revolutionary force becomes, the more they have to take on board and give to a safety valve. And that's what's going on there with UKIP right now. And it's a short-term block to us. Yeah, it might block us in Wales. I think quite likely they'll win seats and will win seats, as a matter of fact, because the Liberal Democrats are going to be obliterated, the Tories are going to be obliterated, and I don't think the Plaid Cymru stand to get a huge benefit, given that they're already in government in Wales, and people look around at the state of their services, they think back to last winter and the unsorted roads, the Plaid Cymru are the same lot. So, what are they so frightened of that they have to co-opt all our ideas? We're a tiny party, let's face it. We're a tiny party, a rag-bag peasant revolt against a huge political elite. Some more peasanty than others. Why are they so frightened of us? It's because of the potential. It's because of the big things out there that are happening. 3 things in particular, very briefly. The bankers' crash, which looks like it was 2 years ago. No, it wasn't. It's only just beginning. It's scarcely started yet, the political and financial pain, which is racing down on the entire world like an out-of-control juggernaut. It is going to be truly horrible, and the Tories' petty cuts aren't going to help. They're going to make it even worse, in fact. The only solution to the mess they got themselves in is actually to print money, but then to use the money for things that need doing. To invest it in proper public works. But you could only do that. It was done in the 1930s, in Britain and in the United States, in various countries. And it did get us out of the hole. But we haven't got the ability to do that anymore because there's no capital controls. The faster money is printed, the sooner it goes to China. So that's it. It's finished. They cannot mend the system with the means that they've got available to them. And it's going to get very much worse, very rapidly indeed. Pain on an unprecedented scale. Pain on a 1930s scale, but people in the 1930s, all over Britain, especially in places like South Wales, people were tough. They really were. They had community, they had spirit, and they'd come from a background they didn't expect very much. They didn't get very much, so they could stand harder times. The British public of today isn't going to wear that at all. They are going to be absolutely livid, and rightly so, because we needn't be in this mess. This country was a world leader. They've given away a world leader in every single industry, in every field of human endeavour. It's been given away to places like China. It's been given away to the multinational corporations. Government after government has systematically deindustrialised this country, and they're steadily making it worse as we speak. You look around the hills, the moors, the mountains, and the seas around Wales, and you see wind farms springing up everywhere. They're spending £250 billion to build those things, and every single wind farm in Britain in the last cold snap was producing, between them, they're producing enough electricity to boil 3,000 kettles. Honestly. £250 billion and destroying our landscapes and our heritage for the sake of 3,000 extra kettles. It's absolutely pathetic. But it's making money for big business. It's making us... the only way wind farms work is because it's not working, all the ones in Wales. They've got to be hooked up to the ones in the Adriatic, the ones in the Baltic, the ones off the coast of Spain. They'll only work if they're part of an integrated European grid. And that's what they want to do. They want to make us reliant, utterly reliant, for more of our energy on Europe. Because then they can say, you can walk away if you want to. The Treaty of Lisbon actually, finally, sets out how a country can leave, how a country can take its independence back from the European Union. So they allow you to, but by meshing us in like that in energy terms, it means we can't get away unless we want to freeze. So that's the name of the game there. That's what's going on. So the financial crash is really going to bite, and it's going to bite hard, because they've wasted so much money on so many absurd projects instead of insulating Britain's economy from the vagaries and the problems of the outside world so that we could stand on our own 2 feet. We can't any longer, and their chickens are going to come home to roost. The second thing they're terrified of, and I'll touch on this very briefly, is the problem of oil. The energy that runs our world. The food you eat, the clothes you wear, as well as the transport, almost everything in our world comes from oil. One of the most interesting leaks in the WikiLeaks thing which has come out recently, is the admission in Saudi Arabia that they've got 40% less oil than they told us. 40% less oil. And the reason that oil prices are now going through the roof is that Saudi Arabia, although it's promising to ramp up its production to make up for what Libya isn't producing, they can't do it because their oil fields are approaching the point where they are declining, just the same as the North Sea oil fields have gone. All our oil well's been blown. We've got scraps left. And Saudi Arabia is reaching the same point. From now on, they'll have to work harder and harder to pump less and less oil. Now, the 1973 energy shock was a gap. The prices went up 3 or 4-fold. That was caused by a gap of 3% between supply and demand. That was all. A 3% gap led to a 4-fold increase in prices. And what we're going to get, particularly as Saudi Arabia's oil runs out, won't go tomorrow. It's just on a downward slope of what they can produce. We'll get a 3% gap each year opening up. In 5 or 6 years' time, there is going to be an unbelievable problem with the price of oil. There's still plenty there, but all the good stuff's been used, all the easy stuff's been used, and I think that is why, again, you look at WikiLeaks, there's no doubt the United States was doing its very best to create instability in the Middle East, to overthrow its own corrupt allies. Why? What the hell are they playing at? There's only one possible solution I can see. They want so much chaos in the Middle East that they have the excuse to go in and take what's left of the oil, including using our boys, because Cameron's already talking about sending the Black Watch into Libya to secure the rights of Libyans. Let the Libyans fight for their own freedom. Very And the political elites of this world have woken up to the oil energy problem, and they're thinking, oh my God, because it really is an oh my God situation. It really is. So all the certainties and all the idea of ever-increasing growth and just a temporary blip down, it's all finished. It's all gone. Until a really effective energy source is found, or unless it is found, and I'm not talking about wind farms, unless they build a huge number of nuclear reactors, safe modern nuclear reactors, and they electrify all our transport. And you can't do it with cars and batteries, because the Chinese have got the last of the rare earth minerals. You need to make the batteries. And the bloody things don't work very well anyway. So it's a huge project, electrifying virtually every scrap of public transport in Britain. Huge new sections of railways need to be built to undo the cuts made in the 1960s and some. It could be done, but it's going to cost an absolute fortune. And Britain hasn't got any fortunes left. We are skint, brassic, broke, absolutely on our arses as a country. We really are. So where are they going to get the money from to engage in the biggest wave of energy transformation that there's ever been? In a hurry. It's incredibly difficult. A real nationalist government, which really had the confidence of its people and really had a sense of direction, could do it. If they said to people, we're all going to have to work really hard, but at the end of it, there's benefits for everybody. The new companies that are going to be set up are going to be set up where possible as workers' cooperatives. The harder you work, the quicker you get it done, the more money you'll get. If they board us all into it, it could be done. It's not going to be like that. It'll be done in little dribs and drabs by giant big foreign companies coming in and snatching the easy bits, snatching the good bits, and screw the rest of us. They won't get it past people. There's just going to be mayhem, and they know it. So they're scared of that. And they're trying to get rid of us, literally, to get rid of us so the public don't have any proper alternative choice. That's what's going on with all the Wazer attacks on this party. External, supposedly internal. It's all about getting rid of this party while they've got time before it's too late, because their time is running out. The final thing they want to talk about, that they want to do, that they're worried about, is that they are part way, and their friends in big business, are part way through the largest looting operation, the theft of the common wealth of this country. Since several hundred years ago, the biggest landowners took the commons of our country away from us. In medieval times, 1/3 of all of Britain was owned by ordinary people in common, in their own village, in their own area. And that was all taken off us in a massive theft. They stole a full 1/3 of the country from us, from our ancestors. And now we're seeing the same thing again. Because Britain has a huge commonwealth. It has its schools, its hospitals, its public buildings, its post office. All these things that have been built up over centuries or at least decades by our ancestors and our forebears and with our taxes. It's an enormous amount of commonwealth. And their friends, mainly in big business, but more on this in a minute, are simply looting the whole lot on a giant scale. So it started off perhaps with British Gas. Remember the adverts, tell Sid, that Sid could buy some British Gas shares? Yep. And this is how it's sold. It's as if everyone's going to buy into this wonderful system. It'll be far, far better. Everyone will own more. So it'll spread ownership. And of course, for a little while, everyone, or people who could, I've got 300 quid, I'll stick it in British Gas shares because I can make profit. For a very short time, it did indeed widen the ownership. But not for very long, because the moment the people who bought 300 or 1,000 shares were a little bit skint or wanted to do something with their kids or something similar, they sold it off, but it's all ended up in the hands of a very few people, which is what's going on with the privatisation scam. And of course it started primarily under the Tories, but it's got worse under the last Labour government. They sold off the whole of the Ministry of Defence's research establishments. They hived it off into a company called Kinetic, and then they sold it off to foreign bidders at a fraction of what it was actually worth. The French who bought the bulk of it got back the cost of buying it almost completely with one sale of a missile patent to the French government. They were simply given it. It was given away. It is indeed a shame. A shame and a disgrace, and literally a crime. This is the theft of our assets and an essential part of our national security. But it didn't stop there. The last Labour government let rip the PFI scam, whereby, in fact, we owe billions more than we know we owe, because they shunted all the various debts over onto supposed private companies, but the government, the taxpayer, is in the end backing them. That, again, is part of this huge theft. The post office is being sliced up, carved out, so the profitable bits go to big business, whereas if you want to send a letter to your granny on the Isle of Skye, that's not profitable, that's simply going to become undoable. It's shutting ordinary people out, but they're cherry-picking it. It's all about allowing the best bits to be cherry-picked. You're seeing it, just beginning to see it with the National Health Service. Again, where, if you've got a little bit of money, you can go private. You can only go private for the simple operations, for the profitable operations. You can't go private with Alzheimer's. Oh, no. And if on one of their simple private money-making operations they cock something up, when you've got to be sorted out with a wound that won't heal, not private, oh no, in the NHS. So they're allowed to take the profitable bits, and it carves it up, and the bits that aren't profitable simply go to the wall, and you get lower and lower and worse service. But it's going to make lots of people very, very large sums of money. Now, Mr Cameron is saying that this new wave of privatisation is going to be about the big society, because it's going to be about charities coming in and helping their neighbours and so on. People helping their neighbours. It's not a big society. It's not about big society. It's about big business. It's about using that as an excuse, just as they use the Tell Sid idea that everyone could buy shares. So they're using the idea that don't worry, if the NHS or schools in your area are going to be run by someone else other than democratically elected local government, which for all its faults, at least if they cock it up, you can get rid of them. So instead of that, it's going to be run by someone else. It might be business, it might be a charity. Wouldn't that be lovely, run by charity? Most charities are incompetent, I'm afraid. And in the end, the charities will get the bits that no one else will look after, because in desperation people will do things for themselves. But when big business comes in and picks the best bits. And that's what's going on here. Why? This comes back actually to the deindustrialisation of Britain. Because in the old days, we ordinary people, they called us hands. It wasn't factory workers, it was factory hands. That was the term. Because all ordinary people were hands to make things in their factories, or to dig things in their mines, to make business money. Now, when they gave up on manufacturing industry in Britain, when they said they were going to ship it all abroad to China, if the Chinese could make stuff cheaper than we can, then our factories must close down. When they shut down the pits, when they get rid of the need for people, that means they can't make profit out of us. Business is there to make profit. So how are they going to make profit out of us? If they can't make profit out of our work, they'll make profit out of our ill health. They'll make profit out of our need to be housed. They'll make profit out of the need of our kids to be educated or our grandparents to be looked after in their old age. They make profit out of us and our problems and our needs instead of out of what we can make. And that's what we are going through right now. And largely it's about, don't fall for the big society, it's about big business. It's going to be very profitable, and when companies can make lots of profit, they buy politicians to pass the laws to allow them to make lots of profits. We get it in the European Parliament. Every few weeks you get a call which appears to be from a company. It's just a survey. And it's a survey on behalf of, say, the insurance industry. And yeah, it sounds like a survey. They're interested in your time. And I do it because they always give, they say, we'll give £50 or €100 or whatever to a charity of your choice. So it takes 10 minutes and some useful charity gets 50 or €100. So I do it. But I'm not fooled because they're not really questioning it. They're not interested in what we think. They try to find the MEPs, and they do it for MPs as well. I'm sure they do it for AMs. In doing this, they find ones who are sympathetic to the industry that they're promoting. And once they've got one who's sympathetic, then they'll wine them and dine them and offer them, well, you do this for us. And at the end of it, when you step down, you don't only get your pension, you also get a job on the board as a non-executive director. What's a non-executive director? Someone who does bugger all work but gets paid money for what they did on that company's behalf when they had political power. It's corruption, pure and simple. This country is rampant with it, and it wants stamping out, and the criminals don't need So, it's about big business. And our friends in UKIP are correct when they say it's about EU directives. Yes, it is. The reason the post office is being broken up at one level is the fact there's an EU directive saying that such services as that have to be opened up to competition from anywhere in Europe. So, yeah, that's true as well. It's about big business and it's about Europe. But the final part of what I'm saying, what I say to you tonight, is about the fact it's something more than that. Because this is also about an initiative from the far left, an unholy alliance between big business and the ultra-far left. It comes from an organisation called the Frankfurt School, which was an ultra-Marxist organisation, which was based, surprisingly enough, in Frankfurt, in Germany, before the Second World War. And the Frankfurt School set about trying to work out how it was that the Russian Revolution, which, according to Marx, was supposed to start in the West, in the most industrialised countries, why hadn't the revolution, the communist revolution, started in countries like Germany and France and Britain? Why had it started in the most backward part of Europe? It was all wrong. Why had this happened? And they concluded that the bulwark that countries in the West had was not just the Christian civilization that Russia had as well, because the communists only just managed to take Russia and then torture it and murder its people on a huge scale, but it was also, we had solid institutions in the West, and we had a firm culture, and we had a sense of national identity which was shared across class boundaries. So they decided that the way to have a revolution wasn't to run around waving guns, it was to undermine those things. It was to undermine Christianity. It was to undermine Western culture, to undermine the family, to undermine the various building blocks of Western society, of a civilised society, so they could build their communist monstrosity on the ruins. And they decided to do this primarily in two ways, simply. One was what they called the culture of critique. It's simply to criticise, criticise, criticise. Just attack, attack, attack. And if your criticism of, say, the church is shown to be wrong, you don't apologise and say, oh, well, OK, we'll leave them alone then. You simply move on to another attack. If your criticism of the family as being patriarchal and repressive of women and repressive of the rights of children and so on, if people answer one point, you just go on attack, attack, attack. You see them doing it against the British National Party as well. You see them doing it against me. You answer one criticism, they just come up with another lie. And another one, and another one. And the idea of the culture of critique is like water dropping on a stone. Gradually it wears it away. That's what the culture of critique from the Frankfurt School was all about. The other thing they decided, right in those early days, was, and by 1933 they did a hop, skip and a jump over to the United States, where they became extraordinarily influential in the sort of political culture of the United States, and they concluded that mass immigration was also a very, very fine way to break up the national identity and the cohesion of the Western world. So mass immigration was okay, yes, it's also a big business ramp. It's very profitable. Big businesses like to have unending sources of cheap labour and non-unionised labour. It makes them more profit. But there's more to it than that. It's also been deliberately done right from the start to destroy the cohesion of our people. And that's been quite basically freely admitted. Frank Field, the Liverpool MP, he actually said a couple of years ago, he said that in the 1960s in the Labour Party, there was, and I was part of, a conspiracy to destroy, I think he actually said the white race. That was the British race. That was Frank Field's own words. Self-admitted, this isn't some kind of crazed fantasy that's been plucked off the internet. It's a simple fact. That's what they were doing as the Frankfurt School spread its tentacles and its ideas right through the political elites of the Western world, particularly Britain. But then in the 1960s, they produced a thing, what they called the revisionist sort of wing of the Frankfurt School, under mainly the guidance of a fellow called Jürgen Habermas. You can look him up. Jürgen Habermas. He's still alive. He was briefly a member of the Hitler Youth when he was young, because young lads of that age all were. They had no choice. But after the war, he became a hardcore revolutionary Marxist. And Habermas was the main theorist of the revisionist Frankfurt School. And they were looking for the 1960s. Well, we've done so much to demolish. We've got the swinging 360s. We've demolished church and family and restraint and so on. But why hasn't there been a revolution? It still hasn't happened. And he and his fellow theorists concluded it was because primarily the working class, where they wanted the revolution to, or thought it would come from, they'd actually been feather-bedded and protected by things that the good old Labour Party in Britain, for instance, had achieved. Things like council housing, things like a national health service, free for people, things like good education system. So however poor a family, they could get a good education if their kids were bright. And they decided that's the problem, because this has given the working class a false consciousness, an identification with the nation, whether it's Italy or Sweden or Britain, instead of identifying with their fellow proletarian strugglers around the world. So, the revisionist school, Frankfurt School, decided we're going to smash that lot up. How are we going to do it? Well, if it's the institutions of the welfare state which encourage people to think, yeah, I'm actually quite proud of this country. My parents and their parents and I and my family, we paid into the system. So we're entitled to something back from the system, and our system's there for the other members of our national family, but it's not there for sponges, and it's certainly not there for people who are coming from abroad who've never paid a penny in. It makes people nationalistic and proud and aware of their own identity and thinking, actually, this country is quite a good place, and it looks after us. It builds loyalty to the nation. So it had to go. So, just a few examples. Education. Once upon a time, the poorest kids from the poorest street in the poorest mining town in South Wales, if they were sharp and bright, did go straight to the local grammar school, and then they went on and they got on to university, to industry, or they became Labour MPs, and they were able to get out of it. And it wasn't perfect, because kids from a middle class background where they had more books at home and so on, yes, they had a head start. But nevertheless, despite that, kids from anywhere could get on if they, and especially their parents, had the ambition, if they had the drive, they could get a good education. And for all that Britain was class-ridden, there was class mobility. The kids from the poorest places ended up in the highest places of the land. Whereas now you have the last government's cabinet and this government's cabinet is stuffed with bloody old Etonians. And the so-called Labour Party, you wouldn't hear a working class voice amongst them, because it's all the upper middle class. All the people now whose parents have the money to send them to a good school. Because the only way you can guarantee to get a good education in this country is either to have enough money to send your kids to a public school, a private school, or at the very least have enough money to be able to buy a house in a nice part, a nice place, a nice posh middle classy area, which is all leafy and green and all the rest of it, where there's a good education even in the comprehensive system. But the destruction of the grammar schools was the greatest crime against the working class, against poor people in this country, which has ever been put upon them, and it was done by the Labour Party. But the ideas from it comes from the Frankfurt School, because it was about making sure the working class didn't have a way up. Because if they haven't got a way up, they've got to fight, and they're going to have a revolution. So that was why they did it. So people who are supposed to be there for working people are actually grinding their faces into the dust It's an absolute disgrace. We'll put it right one day. The Tory party say, oh, well, if enough local parents want a grammar school, they can have one. Hell is like, every single town must have a grammar school by order, and if teachers don't want to teach in them because they think they're elitist, they can bugger off and wash dishes somewhere, and we'll get decent people. So that was one. Another area was, and this is the one where the big money is, of course, is the NHS. And again, it's not just about making money for private companies, it's also about dismantling it, and they are dismantling it. And again, this is deliberate from the Frankfurt School, and in particular, one of their wings, in effect, is an organisation called Common Purpose, which isn't the thing that runs the show, it's just the body which creates the apparatchiks, the middle management of what they call their post-democratic society. That's what Common Purpose is, and it's riddled. The NHS is riddled with Common Purpose graduates, and wherever they go, they bully nurses, they over-organise, they reorganise, they reorganise, they reorganise, they won't leave anything alone. You get a huge wave of bureaucracy, and you get utterly demoralised staff, and they want demoralised staff, because if staff are demoralised and the services aren't working properly, people will say, oh God, what can we do with it? Because they knew when they set about dismantling the NHS to make money for the big boys and to break our people's sense of a community, they knew that if they simply told the British public, vote for us and we'll abolish the NHS, they wouldn't get any votes. It's simply undoable. So, from Marx, the Frankfurt School took this idea of thesis, that's an idea, the antithesis, which is the opposite of it, and you put the one after the other and you get a synthesis, which is where you're going. They took that and they call it something different. They call it problem, reaction, solution. Yeah, some of you know this already. The internet is a wonderful thing, it really is. There's enough lunacy out there to drive you mad, but there's also fact, and this is fact. So, but actually they do it the other way around. They have the solution they want to impose. Their solution is breaking up our NHS utterly for private profit. But they know it's unacceptable, so they have to have the solution as a reaction to a problem. So they create the problem in the first place. So in the end, people say, look, it's not working, it's a shambles, it's demoralised, it's costing us a fortune, it's not delivering the goods. For God's sake, well, basically, if it was an elderly dog, you'd say, look, sorry, Fido, bang. That's what they're trying to do with the NHS. That's what it's about. And again, it's for profit, but it's also for leftist ideology. And finally, the other thing which you'll see coming is housing. The council housing system that was built in places like South Wales through the 1930s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and then it tailed off. You can't have any conception of how good it was unless you make the effort to look at the old photos or talk to people, the last remaining few, who knew what there was before then, where our people lived in the most appalling slums, unbelievable slums, where about 1 in 5 children didn't see their first birthday, mainly because of the damp and the cold and the disgusting conditions in which they were forced to live. Now, in my office in Brussels, I've got a picture, painting, reproduction of a painting of the Nantiglow Ironworks, painted in, I think it's 1827. And various journalists have asked, what have you got that for? Because it's not a particularly attractive picture, because you can scarcely see the sun through the smog and the filth and all the rest of it, and people are trudging to work through mud. And it really is. It's a pretty grim, it's almost a picture of hell in a strange sort of way. So I've got that there because my great-grandmother, Esther Clark, was born there, and her mother was born just down the road from Nantiglow Ironworks, 3 years before that painting was painted. And I've looked up the family history, and my great-grandmother, that isn't very far back if you think about it, my granddad's mother, she was born next to the Nantiglow Ironworks, and the whole family of about 7 or 8 kids lived in a tiny house, and her brother was a miner at the age of 4. And everybody in this room, the local South Walians, you've all got, I know, the same thing in the family, and don't actually think in a welter of self-pity that you had it worse than anybody else, because up in Liverpool, down in the East End of London, or for that matter, in the most, what are now the prettiest rural parts of Monmouthshire or Wiltshire or Somerset, there was grinding, terrible poverty that literally ground our people down into the dirt. And one of the key things that stopped that was the use of public money and our land and our materials and our workers to build council housing. Housing, cheap, good, really good at the time when it was first built, affordable housing for real working people, which was then under local democratic control. That was an amazing achievement, but it's a block to the communist revolution, and it's also a huge block. If you want to make money out of the British people, you need to make money out of their housing. And that's why we're partway through the process of privatising the entire housing stock, public housing stock of this country, and they put it into housing associations and said, oh, this is still democratic and it's still not for profit. But you watch, over the next few years, they will all go bankrupt. Every last one of them. It's happening already. It's happening in Ireland on a grand and enormous scale. And every time they go bankrupt, they're snapped up by giant let-for-profit corporations, because no one else can afford to buy them. No local charity can afford to do it. And that was always intended. The government wanted to do that with our council housing system, but no government could have done it, least of all Labour governments. So they put it into the halfway house, which they know will fail. And now as their crisis, it is their crisis, their banking crisis, leads to failures like that, they come in at fire sale prices, snap up the whole lot. Well, they can snap them up as cheaply as they like, I tell you that, because when we come to power, we will take them back into public ownership without a penny's compensation. And there, in simple terms, you have the picture of this hideous, unholy alliance between multinational capitalism and the far left and the Eurocrats of the European Union, all of them screwing the poor people of this country and the tax-paying of this country down into the dirt. And they're doing it not because it's great ideas, not because it's a great society, because there's great profits involved. And it is one enormous theft, one enormous crime for which they must face trial and they must face punishment, and our people must have restitution. And they know these things cannot be done without provoking a ferocious backlash, and that is why they're trying to get rid of us. It's why they're happy to have UKIP, because they wouldn't talk about such thing. We see them traipsing into the voting lobby there. They come and they sit there and they press their buttons, and of course if the planes are about to go, they leave. But before they do, any single measure which is there for the banks, oh yeah, they're in favour. Or anything which might control the banks, oh no, they're against. Anything which is actually about social justice, they're automatically against, because they're a rich man's party. They're an elite party. They're an elite safety valve party. It's all they are. They will not deliver. But they're there because the powers that be can see there's going to be a rebellion against what they are doing, and they're desperate to try to harness it to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And our job is to make sure that they don't get their way. Our job is to exploit the fact that they're having to run a safety valve, because the safety valve will open some people's eyes. It will bring people broadly into the cause. The public really can't tell the difference between UKIP and the BNP. To an extent, that doesn't matter. If they come to them, they're close enough to us to come further. And our job, perhaps for the next couple of years actually, until we get the Labour government back again, and then we can really motor, our job is to win in the PR elections where we can win, and to work and burrow our way deep into local communities so that we can win in local communities and become a part of the political scenery there and a part of the community scenery and the community spirit there. And the more they dismantle the fabric of our society, the more they rip the old welfare safety nets to shreds, the more, although charities won't do it, local communities will look after themselves. We need to be there, we're going to be there, we are there already in some places, filling the gaps that they are leaving. We need to do that. Over the next couple of years, you're going to see police almost abolished. They're simply going to vanish from the streets of Britain because there isn't the money to put them there. They'll be in safely in their stations filling in forms in triplicate and more than, I don't know, if you have a form in 6, I don't know what you call that, but they'll be doing it. They won't be there on the streets. Well, the time is going to come very soon when ordinary local people will do what the rich do, which is to hire or create their own private security operations, not as vigilantes or something crazy like that, but just there looking after a community, looking after people, making sure the kids don't go too wild, that they are called to account and so on. We're going to be doing that. That's the kind of thing that we need to do, because we're on a long, hard road. And to have a few measures of elected success, and therefore the ability to speak on behalf of people, such as in the European Parliament, such as in the Welsh Assembly, is a crucial part of that strategy, but it's only a part of a much bigger strategy of really becoming a part of a community, of becoming community leaders. So we've got to educate people about, for instance, the things I've been talking about tonight, and I've been looking around and no one's gone to sleep, and nobody's lost it or hasn't understood it, because this isn't actually particularly complex, and in any case, ordinary people can cope with complex subjects. And it's a horrible piece of upper-class London suburban snobbery to think that just because people speak with some kind of an accent, they're in some way stupid. Are they hellers like? We're all essentially the same. We're all basically the same British stock. We've all got the same IQ as a broad general sense. We've all got the same common sense. And we can all see what's going wrong in our country. So yes, of course, we can talk about and listen to and think and discuss and take on board complex issues. And then the important thing is to take them out there to other people, and especially to take them out there to the people being brought into the phony organisations like UKIP, so that they bring them near us and then we radicalise them for the day when we get the chance. And we will get the chance, because for all that they're doing, for all that they're trying to take advantage of their economic shambles, their bankers' crash, don't think they caused it. They didn't. They'll take advantage of it, they didn't cause it. It's just caused because their whole system is fundamentally unstable and flawed and cannot go on. So they can control it to a certain extent, but in the end it will run away from them, and they will lose control. Mr. Gorbachev, in the dying days of the Soviet Union, tried to have what he called perestroika or glasnost, openness and reform. He tried to do it and ran away with him, and it destroyed the whole system. And that's what we're going to see in this country as well. Their system is going to collapse, literally to collapse. Whether like that, over a space of a few months or over a few years, we still don't know. But it will do. And that is the time that we have to educate for and prepare for and organise for, because we'll only get one crack at this to save our people, to save this country. After that, it's downhill all the way. There comes a certain point when the fabric of society has been so broken, when there's so little left, when the fellas who know how to make machine tools are so old, or they're not there anymore, they can't teach new young apprentices how to do it. There'll come a time when it's too late, and our civilisation's finished. But we're nowhere near that yet. Nowhere near it. This is the country that gave the world the Industrial Revolution, and they powered it from South Wales. We can turn it around. This country still produces a huge proportion of the basic raw material inventions of the modern world. Even the internet, the computer, these are all ours. They came from the people of this little island. Still being turned out from our universities, the genius which could transform the world to make it a better place. If we had a government which said, right, that's a good idea, it'll help build the industry of this country, it'll help build the power of this country, it'll help the people of this country to make this country a better place, and if it helps the rest of the world while we're at it, then it's a very good thing, but it's not for us to interfere with the rest of the world. We're simply here to look after our own people, because that's the duty of a government. It can be done, and it will be done. And if you think, well, when? Because times are pretty dark now, don't worry about that, because it may be trite, but it is true that the night is always darkest just before the dawn. But the dawn will come, the light will come, and we will be there to lead our people to the light.